Breakfast with Paul Bonjorno.
Hello and welcome to the 20th year of Meet the Press, a milestone for us as the longest-running Sunday morning political program. And what a year already. Julia Gillard was looking for a fresh start, but was soon mired in the quicksand of a hung parliament and dreadful opinion polls. Undaunted, the Prime Minister presses on. For her and Tony Abbott, it was time for the vision thing.
A new economy which is prosperous and fair, creative and skilled, where mining and manufacturing flourish and services grow, where the government manages the economy for working people and for the future.
My vision for Australia is to restore hope, reward and opportunity by delivering lower taxes, better services, more opportunities for work and stronger borders.
Kevin Rudd's vision inspired by the Year of the Dragon, symbol of power and authority. Simon Crean thinks he should forget it. He's no team player.
One thing the Labor Party's got to learn is that it doesn't solve its polling problems by simply changing the leader.
We're all members of a ministerial team. It's a pretty hard-working team. I work with these women and men every day, every week, every month.
Where the scene on the Labor side of politics is starting to resemble more a scene from the movie Gladiator.
But the Prime Minister has her own Praetorian Guard.
Very strong leader, and in tough times you need strong leaders.
Bill Shorten is a guest. And later, the wild card in the Queensland election, Bob Katter's Australian Party. The man himself joins us. But first, Hermione Kitson has what's making news this Sunday, February 5.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning. Prime Minister Julia Gillard will pitch Labor's recovery strategy to nervous MPs today in a special meeting in Canberra. The government's been plagued by poor polling and leadership tensions. The Tasmanian backbencher Dick Adams worries voters have lost trust in the Prime Minister.
Credibility is an issue, but that has to be dealt with.
Residents in Charleville in Queensland have spent a nervous night waiting to see if the Warrego River flood levy holds. More than 600 people have been evacuated from their homes in the town. Over the border in New South Wales, 16,500 people remain isolated by floodwaters. Protesters have stormed Syrian embassies around the world after reports suggesting 200 people were killed by government forces in the city of Homs. The UN Security Council is preparing for a crucial vote on whether to condemn the regime. And in a local response to the violence in Homs, a group of men last night caused extensive damage to the ground floor of the Syrian embassy in Canberra. Federal police say 3 staff members were there at the time, but no one was hurt. And those are the headlines this morning. Paul?
Thanks, Hermione. And it's welcome to the program Workplace Relations Minister Bill Shorten. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Paul.
Well, the meeting today in Canberra with the Prime Minister, is this a chance for Julia Gillard to clear the air? It seems to be billed as something of a crisis meeting.
Well, I think billing it as that just shows the febrile nature of reporting of the government. I think most MPs are attending this meeting. They're frustrated that there's so much of this debate about leadership. They want to get on with the job of promoting what we're doing and talking about ideas for the year ahead. I think it'll be a constructive meeting.
It's also reported that Kevin Rudd won't be there, but in a sense, will he be the elephant in the room?
No, he's doing his job as Foreign Minister. There'll be a few MPs who won't be there. Not everyone can get to every meeting. What people want to know is the government focused on making sure that Australian families are going to be able to make ends meet? People in Australia are worried about the scenes they see in Europe. They want to know that the government's focusing on jobs in the future. That's what this caucus meeting will be discussing.
Well, one of your backbench colleagues, Bernie Ripoll, who's a supporter of Julia Gillard, he says that the Rudd people should bring it on. He's confident that they haven't got the numbers. Do you think it'd be a good idea to bring it on next Tuesday, maybe?
I think this whole leadership debate has been overcooked. The nearest analogy I can use when I explain it to people in the street is say, Bill, we want politics in Australia not to be short-term, negative sloganeering and backstabbing and egos. The nearest analogy I use to explain this latest outburst of media reporting is it reminds me of the millennium bug in the lead up to 2000. Remember, in the lead up to the millennium, we thought every computer in the world would crash. You know, we woke up the next morning, perhaps some with a hangover, and the computers were still working. This is well overcooked, this issue.
Well, the latest round of talk was set off by the Galaxy poll, followed by the Essential poll, followed by the News poll, and tomorrow the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald will have the Nielsen poll. Now, if that follows the trend of the other polls, and in fact it's been worse for Labor in recent times, won't that just be another nail in the coffin?
Well, I think we need to look at what some of those polls said, and, you know, I, like most students of politics on both sides of the political fence, know the polls go up and polls go down. But the Galaxy poll last Monday reported Labor's primary voters going up from 29% to 34%. Now, of course, that's good news for the government, so that was on, you know, it wasn't at the front of the paper, was it? But I think even beyond debating the merits of individual polls, what Australians want is what the Prime Minister is actually doing. She gave a speech about
But is it too late
skills.
for her? You know, you've got Dick Adams says that she's got a credibility problem. People can't believe her. Andrew Wilkie couldn't believe her. She signed up to a deal, wouldn't be Prime Minister without that deal.
Well, let's just distinguish each of those points you're making. Dick Adams has been a long-serving member of Parliament. He gives his views. I do not believe that everything that's reported is exactly what Dick thinks. In terms of Mr Wilkie, that's a different set of issues about problem gambling. The government has got a strategy on problem gambling. He was naturally disappointed that his particular plan couldn't get up, but if we want to talk about issues of the government...
Put it this way, is it beyond repair for Julia Gillard? Is there any way back? Is a challenge inevitable?
No, it's not beyond repair. There we go, straight answer. And the classic example was the issue of problem gambling. What we had was an issue where we could only get 74 out of 150 votes in the Parliament. If you've got 74, your legislation won't pass. Also, there was a lot of technological problems with the particular path upon which we'd initially embarked.
So you're saying Wilkie wasn't flexible enough?
Oh, no, he had his views, that's fair enough.
Okay.
But what I am saying to you is this is the nature of what's going on in Australia. The people are getting frustrated that all we want to do in Canberra, people think, is just deal with the gossip and the backstabbing. Problem gambling is a classic issue where the Prime Minister
let's go to
cut
one of
through
the
and did
issues
the right
that's
thing.
very dear to your heart. According to the Weekend Media, Julia Gillard's game plan is to convince voters she leads a competent Labor government, as you were saying, and a national disability scheme is a key. But Tony Abbott wants to get a big slice of the action. Here he is.
Sure.
The Coalition strongly supports the Productivity Commission's recommendation for a disability insurance scheme. This important and necessary reform can't fully be implemented until the budget returns to strong surplus.
Well, it's got a $6 billion price tag. What Tony Abbott said there is dead right. It can't be fully implemented, can it, in the present economic circumstances?
No. What Tony Abbott did was disappoint a lot of people with disabilities and carers. I've been very involved with this, along with Senior Minister Macklin and the Prime Minister. What's being proposed is that by 2018, we have a national insurance scheme which will provide 400,000 plus profoundly and severely disabled people and their carers much greater support. What Tony Abbott was doing was saying that this is an aspiration, and when we pass whatever tests that the Liberal Party would put into place if they got into government, then they would have a look at this. They're making disability a political issue by going on the go slow on this issue. I think it shows the classic example. He would hand back the mining tax to
So you're saying
Reinhardt
the disability scheme will come in no matter what the state of the budget?
Oh, I believe two things. One is that we'll get the budget back into black, and two, that we'll implement an NDIS. But it's the classic example of the difference between Tony Abbott and us.
We'll come back to him.
He'll give money back to the richest mining companies in Australia, but he won't guarantee for the poorest carers and people with disabilities in Australia.
Time for a break. When we return with the panel, is the government using Fair Work Australia to save Craig Thompson's job in Parliament? And the Best Kept Secret of the Week award goes to reluctant heart surgeon Tony Abbott.
As a politician, what do you think is your greatest strength and what do you think is your greatest weakness?
Look, my first boss in politics was John Hewson, and John Hewson had a phrase. He said, "Don't practice open heart surgery on yourself in public." So I'm gonna take the Hewson advice on that and decline.
You're on Meet the Press with Workplace Relations Minister Bill Shorten, and welcome to the panel. Malcolm Farr from news.com.au.
Paul.
And Misha Schubert from the Sunday Age. Good morning, Mel and Misha. Well, the opposition has ramped up its attack on the length of time Fair Work Australia is taking to investigate the Health Services Union. Tony Abbott says the 3-year probe is protecting Craig Thompson, who he describes as a tainted number propping up the government. The union whistleblower suspects political interference.
There needs to be a competent external inquiry into the going-ons at Fair Work Australia. Why has it taken so long? Why are we still waiting for answers? And why are we in this position? We need this to end.
Minister, Fair Work Australia is your most important instrument to protect the rights and conditions of Australian workers, but its credibility is at risk at the moment by what's been perceived as an extended inquiry into a relatively small issue. Don't you have an obligation to protect the credibility of this body by intervening?
I think the best way to protect Fair Work Australia is to protect its independence. It's a statutory body, it's doing its investigations, and the argument which says that the government needs to intervene would undermine its independence. It's an independent body.
Craig Thompson is a crucial number for Labor in the Parliament. Do you have full confidence in him?
In terms of what's going to happen with the inquiry or my personal dealings with him as a Member of Parliament?
Both.
Well, in terms of my personal dealings as a Member of Parliament, fine. In terms of what happens with the inquiry, we've got to see what the inquiry finds. But in the meantime, I do believe people deserve the presumption of innocence.
Will you guarantee that the Fair Work Australia report is made public?
Well, I'm not in charge of whether or not that gets made public or not. That's, again, a decision which is made by the regulator.
I'm not sure of that. Are you sure you would have no ability to make public that report?
As I understand, that decision of whether or not it gets made public is influenced by a number of factors which are with the preserve of the regulator. For instance, if it turns out that the report has findings which then need to trigger an investigation by the DPP, releasing it publicly may prejudice any subsequent criminal investigation. So I don't think it's quite as black and white as your question would suggest. We need to see the facts.
Your regulator, you've also set up a review of the Fair Work laws that Labor introduced after it came to power. Do you see that there's a case for major changes to that legislation or just modest changes in line with some of the criticisms that have been made?
Well, there are some people who think there should be major changes. There are others who don't. We've got 3 eminent independent experts to review it. What we did is we redressed the imbalance in the workplace and the loss of the fair go which the former Liberal Tony Abbott work choices policies had, and we got the balance back in somewhere in the middle of the road. But then what we're doing is we're reviewing it to see how it's going. I think an example of how the Act is working well, though, is what I think was the biggest industrial relations story this week. It was the equal pay case where 150,000 low-paid people in community and social services, work in homelessness, rape crisis centres, are going to get, over the next 8 years, admittedly, it's a long phase-in, equal pay, and the discrimination which they used to get because they're a feminised occupation is finally being dealt with. Now, that's proof it works. So
OK, well, this morning Tony Abbott told Andrew Bolt there are problems with the Fair Work Act, and he's promising changes. Here he is.
Well, I certainly think that there is a flexibility problem, there's a militancy problem, and above all else, there's a productivity problem with the Fair Work Act.
Is he right?
Oh, I've got to love these guys. I tell you, the only problem in industrial relations is that they don't have a policy. It's in a witness protection program. I mean, let's go to those 3 words that Tony Abbott uses. And Tony Abbott's good at using code words. He sort of fronts up and says, we're Liberals, therefore productivity must be higher under us. The facts of the matter contradict him completely. Under the Howard government, productivity started to fall away in the 2000s. Let's pick the poster child of individual contracts, the mining industry. Now, admittedly, mining prices are up, but what's happened is productivity's fallen away sharply. What sustained our mining boom is the increase in demand in prices. 3 simple numbers: 400% increase in prices for minerals, 100% increase in workforce, 25% increase in volume. What we're seeing is a slump in productivity in the poster child of individual contract relations. So just because the Libs say, trust us, we're Liberal, productivity will go up, isn't supported by fact. And I love that other word that the coalition use, flexibility. They never actually unpack what that means, except we did see Ted Baillieu, the Premier in Victoria, complain as did Jeff Kennett, the former Premier in Victoria, complained that people in the hospitality and retail shouldn't be getting penalty rates on weekends. When Conservatives use the term flexibility, what they actually mean is that if you're poor, and those are the 2 of the 3 bottom-paid industries in Australia, that you should take a pay cut. Why is it in Australia? Coalition DNA says that the only way that the rich can get richer is by low-paid workers getting penalty rate cuts.
Of the 10 appointments made to Fair Work Australia since the start, the Act came into operation, 7 of them have been people from the trade unions or been industrial lawyers of some sort. Justice Giudice leaves at the end of this month. Can you say that someone from the business sector will be promoted to take his spot, or at least some other position on the board?
Malcolm, I'm not going to preempt the process. We've got all sorts of processes having a look at who fills that very important position. But let's set some numbers right. In the Howard government, of their 16 most recent appointments, 15 were employer and employer advocates from that side or did legal work for them. 15 out of 16. So when you look at it, and some of those, anyway, I won't go into some of those appointments, they were legitimate, no, fair enough, but when you look at it, you had 15 out of 16. When you put that on top of their 3, the imbalance argument you're running isn't borne out by the facts. It's more like 8 plays 16.
But this exacerbates industry concerns that the swing back, the balance, is not in the middle, it's gone too much to the union side.
But at some point, we've got to move beyond the generalities. Swing back, flexibility. Let's decode that. What is now happening is that low-paid professional workers in community services with tertiary qualifications are finally going to get some gender discrimination overcome. Industrial action, take out Qantas and the inability of state governments to manage public servant relationships in their states. Industrial action's at a very low number historically.
Minister, just briefly before we go, you told Neil Mitchell during the week that you never ever want to be the leader of the Labor Party. Is that a John Howard never ever?
Well, first of all, it's good to be on this show. I just wish Tony Abbott would come on and do serious interviews. Good we got him out of hiding for the National Press Club.
But why would you never ever want to be leader? I mean, people look at you, you're a person of promise and ambition.
Let's unpick what that question's about. It's about putting more confusion to undermine Julia Gillard. I'm not signing up to undermine her. She's my boss.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Bill Shorten. Coming up, the wannabe third force in Queensland politics, Bob Katter, joins us. And cartoonist Alan Moyer in the Sydney Morning Herald sees more than a big pizza pie in the sky. It's Moonface Kevin spooking Julia.
And the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore.
I think you're letting him get to you. You're on Meet the Press. The Queensland state election is shaping as a critical test for brand Labor and a harbinger for what might happen federally if the Sunshine State goes completely dark on the party. Labor's warning that the LNP is a wholly owned subsidiary of billionaire mining magnate Clive Palmer and has ramped up its campaign against his links with the opposition.
I think people should be very worried about what they've seen this morning back from Clive Palmer. We don't want Queensland to go back to the bad old days.
While frontrunner Campbell Newman is worried popular local Labor members may stymie not only his personal fate, but also the opposition's victory chances.
People who want a change of government have to make their vote count. The only way we'll get rid of Anna Bligh and a tired 20-year Labor government is to vote for the LNP.
Well, not quite. Bob Katter's Australian Party says a plague on both their houses and already has candidates for 60 of the 89 seats. And it's welcome back to the program, Bob Katter. Good morning, Mr Katter.
G'day to everybody.
Now, I was reading the most recent Galaxy poll that had you at 4%. On that figure in Queensland, you're not going to be able to do a Pauline Hanson and win seats, are you?
At the same time, with Pauline Hanson, they had her on 5%. In the election, she got 23%. But Paul, because they got it so wrong, we really need your researchers to work a little bit harder. they have a second poll, which is the more likely, most likely poll, because they know that their conventional polling just doesn't get it right with parties like ours. And that is consistently polling between 28 and 29%. And I invite any journalist to walk down any street in Queensland, whether it's Queen Street in Brisbane or Bird Street in Longreach, if you like, and just see the people's reaction. That's all.
Well, there's a big difference, though, in Queensland now. It virtually has first past the post voting. So, and the LNP, for one, are urging people to vote. Won't that stymie your chances of picking up seats?
If she had got an extra 6,000 votes, Pauline Hanson, she would have won 21 seats. We intend to win plenty more than 21 seats, I can tell you that. And we're polling the same as she was polling conventionally at the time. Now, I want to add to that the fact that, I mean, the LNP leader just came on and, you know, it does you no good to tell lies. He said the only way you can get rid of Labor is to vote for us. Well, that's just quite frankly a lie. If you vote for us, we'll replace Labor. I mean, so why do you say those things? And it gets all politicians a bad name doing that. I urge them not to do that.
Mr Katter, just turning to the federal political landscape, if Kevin Rudd became...
I'm sorry, I just need to say something else there. I just need to say something else there. I mean, the Premier said that the LNP is owned by Clive Palmer, she said. Well, that's not true, because they're owned also by the coal seam gas, the gas industry.
Okay, so back to the federal scene.
Her misdemeanor's not quite as bad.
If Kevin Rudd became Labor leader again federally, would you back him to stay in government?
Look, I put up my 20 points. I mean, people don't, no one seems to understand what we're about in politics and why we're going to do so well.
But would you back him over Tony Abbott?
People no longer want this marketism. And I put my 20 points out there last time, and that's what I'll be doing this time. Now, I'd have to say to you that I know Kevin's thinking on a number of things, and he most certainly be very keen to implement some of those 20 points.
Do you think he'd make a better Prime Minister than Tony Abbott? Or would you be more inclined to vote for Mr. Abbott?
The other thing that worries me greatly, one of those points that Tony Abbott agreed to was the ethanol. Now, he had the numbers to do that before the Greens took over, and I just couldn't get him to do it. So he failed the test of integrity there because, you know, he agreed to do it. He had the numbers. Well, he can say, I'm not the government, but you had the numbers to do it. And, of course, the LNP in New South Wales have broken both promises on the ethanol. They were to go to 10%. They broke that promise. They're staying on 6%. And then they said they would not sell the electricity industry. And this is a burning question in Queensland because everyone knows if the ALP is re-elected, she will sell the power stations and the transmission lines. And if the LNP gets there, they're going to sell it faster.
Mr.
They're going to sell it faster. That's the only difference.
If there's an adverse finding between Labor against Labor MP Craig Thomson, Tony Abbott is operating on the assumption that you will vote with the opposition in a no confidence motion. Is he entitled to have that expectation?
He is not entitled to it, nor is Kevin Rudd entitled to it. I mean, we'll put our... Look, for our nation to survive, it can't survive being an iron ore quarry and a coal quarry. And there's not a single Australian that agrees with that. But if you know that you vote for either of those two parties, that's what you're going to continue to get. Now, we've put an option out there, and we will assert that option, and I have every belief that the people will realise that the only way to change... You can change government, you won't change policies. But what I'm saying in answer to your question is no one's got our vote. You give North Queensland the right to survive, but every one of those 20 points can be applied to Australia as a whole, with one exception. 19 of those points are for the survival of Australia. And you cannot survive as a nation with just two industries, quarrying coal, not mining, quarrying coal and quarrying iron ore. You cannot survive on two industries. And that is what the mainstream parties are asking our country.
Just really quickly, because we're almost out of time, how do you rate the job that Julia Gillard is doing as Prime Minister?
Oh, look, I mean, Julia's had very great problems, and I don't like denigrating people. I really don't, and I'm not going to I sort of don't do it, and I'm not going to start now. But her problems have been very, very difficult indeed, and maybe that explains why the government... But the decision on carbon tax is just a dreadful decision. I mean, Kevin Rudd had the courage to reverse his decision on it because he realised it was wrong. And, you know, Julia needs to do the same thing. And her difficulty is that she hasn't done it.
OK, thank you very much for being with us today, Bob Katter. And thanks to our panel, Malcolm Farr and Misha Schubert. A transcript and a replay of this program will be on our website and our Facebook page. Until next week, goodbye.